The 2022 NFL season is in the books for the Rams, and all sorts of big questions coming up next, namely, what happens with Sean McVay? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Travis Rogers. You can follow me on Twitter under that name, at Travis Rogers. Not only do I host the Locked On Rams pod, I am also the host of the Rams pre-half and post-game show on their flagship station, ESPN 710. Just finished up our 7th season here. And while it was incredibly disappointing, still an NFL season nonetheless. Can't wait for the next one to come around and get started all over again. Click that subscribe button in your podcast feed so you get it every single day. Check us out on YouTube as well. Our Locked On Rams YouTube channel is a great way to take in the pod. Let me remind you that today's podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, here's what I want to get to today. I want to talk about who might not be here by the time we get to training camp, by the time we get ready to start the 2023 season. We're talking some big names along the way. I want to talk about Baker Mayfield's future as a member of the LA Rams. I think we got some really good answers on him yesterday, and I think it probably may work in the Rams' favor. That's coming up in just a little bit, but let's start with the topic of the day. And other than the fact that the NFL playoff field has been set and the incredibly good news about Damar Hamlin being on the road to recovery, it looks like he's going to make a full recovery, which is just absolutely terrific. The story, I think, of the final weekend of the NFL season was the discovery, reporting, speculation, however you want to characterize it, about Sean McVay's future as the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams. Now, if you are a regular listener of this podcast, and you should be, that's why you need to click the subscribe button in your podcast feed. You've heard me say on multiple occasions that I would have been fall on the floor shocked if Sean McVay decided to walk away after this season. And I felt like that right up until the middle of last week. In the middle of last week, I think things changed. In the middle of last week, you heard him drop a breadcrumb that I thought was breadcrumb's the wrong word, a loaf of bread. How about that, right? An entire loaf of Dave's Killer Bread right there on the floor. Great bread, by the way. I like the seeds in it. Anyway, it's a different podcast. He said, when asked by Jordan Rodriguez of The Athletic, are you going to go back to TV? You know, the speculation is starting. And he gave kind of by his, it was an interesting answer because it was classic McVay, and then it was particularly honest, especially by the standard of NFL head coaches, but it was also a little mealy-mouthed and, trying to say something without really saying it. What he said was, I've made no secret of the fact that this is something that I would like to do at some point. I've made no secret of the fact that I'm interested in that. It's flattered to be considered, but I'm very happy with what I'm doing right now. It's the right now that made you go, wait, hold on a second, because right now means that it could be for only right now. That right now means what about a week from now, a month from now, a year from now? I thought that Sean McVay at 36 years old, 6 years as a head coach in the NFL, 4 of them very good, 2 of them extraordinary, 1 of them arguably career-defining and becoming a Super Bowl champion, would not have really the first crappy season of his entire NFL coaching career and say, okay, that's it. Now, there are extenuating circumstances, and they're not hard to find. The extenuating circumstances are he's come off of a 5-year run, well, now 6-year run, but coming into the season, a 5-year run that they've played deep into the season every single year, went to the Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl, and so you had as short of a season, off season, as possible. During the shortest offseason as possible, he also got married, and that was after having his wedding postponed 2 separate times because of the pandemic. So he has a wedding to attend to. His wife is Ukrainian. She still has family in Ukraine. So obviously there's a great deal of emotional toll that would take, knowing that your spouse, that your wife is worried for the safety of her extended family who's in the middle of a war-torn country. That would certainly be very, very difficult. Anybody that has ever spoken to Sean McVay, even for 5 seconds, knows that the guy burns hot, that the guy burns incredibly intensely. And this is not I'll just take a couple of weeks off and recharge my batteries and unplug. If he's going to do this, he's going to do it full speed ahead all the time, 20 hours a day, just like we've expected him to. And like, quite frankly, we expect most of these NFL coaches to be. I don't know if a ton of these guys have great work-life balance, and especially a coach like Sean McVay, who's on the younger side, probably wants to start a family, probably wants to attend to his wife and her needs and what she's been going through, like we just mentioned. And also, oh, by the way, I got to figure out how to coach a football team that won the Super Bowl a year ago, and we're getting our butts kicked up and down the field on a regular basis. That can't be easy. And it would take a toll. Now, the question becomes, what's the timeline on all of this? When does the reporting has been kind of all over the map, but the general through line of all of this is what happens next is up to him. The Rams obviously want him back. He's trying to figure out whether he can just take a little bit of time off and recharge and come back and commit to this the way that he believes he needs to, or does he need to step away from football for a while? Does that mean going to a broadcast booth? Does that mean just doing nothing for a period of time? Because look, he could do either of those things. Now, the musical chairs of the broadcast booths are kind of filled up at the moment. That doesn't mean they wouldn't create space for somebody like McVay. Maybe it's just going and sitting around and doing nothing for a period of time. Maybe that's something that he'd like to try and do. I don't really envision him doing that. That doesn't strike me as that sort of guy. Or maybe it's just, hey, give me a couple of weeks, give me a month, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to be ready to go. I am a football coach. I just need some time to unplug for a second, right? In his term, a second could be a couple of weeks, a month, or whatever it is. But I am coming back. Then the Rams can plan accordingly. They can have somebody prepare for the draft. They can have somebody prepare for OTAs. They can have somebody prepare for free agency, and then he can slide right back into that role when he's ready to come back and do it. It changes everything. It changes absolutely everything, because if he's here, it's kind of, let's just keep doing what we've doing. It's been a bad year. You're going to get healthier. You'll make some moves. You're going to cut some guys, all the things that happen at the end of a regular season. And I don't think it's unrealistic to think that the Rams could come back next year and be a playoff team. I don't think it's unrealistic at all if he comes back. If he doesn't come back, where do you go? Do you hire Raheem Morris, who's in the building? Do you go outside the building? Do you call Sean Payton? Do you go and start a wide-ranging search and try to figure out what's coming next? And if that is the case, now Payton would be one answer, Raheem might be a different answer, and a third candidate might be a third different answer. Do you kind of say, where are we in our window, and do we start to reevaluate what's going to happen next? Do we continue to keep our foot on the gas and try to make it happen right now, or do we kind of pull back a little bit and figure out what might happen 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and start looking at this through a slightly different prism? The McVay piece is the first decision that needs to get made before you can make all of these other decisions. So everybody's kind of in a holding pattern for him right about now. All right, we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield, what we saw yesterday in the season finale. He played 5 games for the Rams at quarterback. He won 2. He lost 3. What does it mean for him and his future in Los Angeles? That is coming up next. But first, here is a little bit about our friends from Tommy John, right? Winter mornings can be cold. Not so much here in Los Angeles, but your tip for tackling the day in comfort, the new Tommy John Loungewear, so you can be cozy wherever you go. When you start the year in Tommy John, you're that much more comfortable, so you can do everything just a little bit better. We're talking about Tommy John Loungewear, pajamas, and underwear. They have dozens of comfort innovations like luxurious soft tri-blend and micromodal fabrics with 4-way stretch. You know what that means? No pinching, right? No lint balls or fuzz, none of that stuff. And with over 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5 stars reviews, people love Tommy John. That's why they don't have customers. They have fanatics. I can't wait to get them on every single day. Nice and comfy and soft. You just feel like you can kind of go do whatever you want. Plus, it's all backed by Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or it is free, right? It is a free guarantee. Get 20% off your first order at TommyJohn.com/locked on. That's 20% off right now at TommyJohn/locked on. See the site for details. This episode of Locked On Rams is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. All right. You know how hard it can be, right? Especially new year. You're trying to get everything squared away. You're trying to get started. You're trying to get going on making it the best year ever, right? You're trying to find a way to get yourself started, only there's not an owner's manual to you exactly, right? There's not exactly a way to kind of unpack all of the things that may be going on in your life, because unfortunately, life does not come with a user's manual. But BetterHelp therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, it's secure, and it's accessible anywhere, and it is 100% online. Now, what does it feel like? What does it do? It just allows you to have a better toolbox, a better set of skills when it comes to feeling better about yourself, having techniques to get through that next little obstacle that you might run into it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen people who have gone through the process and they come out feeling better and better equipped to handle whatever it is that's going to be thrown their way. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more learn more and save 10% off of your first month at betterhelp.com/locked on. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Thanks again for making Locked On Rams your first listen every day. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL pod and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with NFL key predictions every Friday. And Monday, local insiders covered the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield and what may happen with him in a Rams uniform or somewhere else. He gave an answer yesterday at the end of the game, and he basically said, look, I'm not going to go somewhere just so I can check the box of being a starting quarterback. I believe I am a starting quarterback in this league, but we're going to take a minute, see what's out there, and we'll go from there. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was the gist of what he was getting at. It's been an interesting ride for him as a member of the Rams. He comes in on that Thursday night against the Raiders with expectations, nothing, right? Just come in here and see what happens. They win the game. They win the game by driving the ball, 98 yards in about a minute and a half, no timeouts, and he hits Van Jefferson down the left edge for the touchdown pass, and they win the game. And it's shocking. They go to Green Bay, and they don't do anything. And then come back on Christmas against the Denver Broncos, and they score 51 points, and he's lighting it up. He looks absolutely terrific along the way. 2-1. Then he goes and plays against the Chargers and doesn't look particularly good. The Chargers are a very good team, and, it is what it is. So bringing us to yesterday's game against the Seattle Seahawks, the Seahawks are average. I'm almost by every possible definition. They're 9-8. They're not good. They're not bad. They don't do anything particularly well. They don't do anything particularly terribly. They're just kind of a mediocre team. And yesterday's game was played in a little bit of rain, and it was cold, not ideal conditions, but enough to, I think, get a really good evaluation. Not against a terrible team like the Broncos, not against a really good team like the LA Chargers, but rather just see where we are in the grand scheme of things. Baker Mayfield wasn't very good yesterday. Baker Mayfield missed a lot of open receivers. Baker Mayfield made some bad throws. Baker Mayfield underthrew a ball that could have won the game for the Rams, that ultimately set up an interception that allowed the game to be won for the Seattle Seahawks. You saw him with that just a half a second slow to get rid of that ball, that last little pump. We saw him look a little frantic, look a little sped up. Now, is he a starting quarterback in this league? Maybe somewhere. There are not 32 great quarterbacks in this league. So Is he one of the 32 best? Maybe. But he might be 28th, 29th, 30th, somewhere in there, right? That not quite outside of the 32, but not very far inside of it either. Now, the question becomes, can the Rams afford to keep him in a backup role? And is he interested in that role? I think for his sake, it's probably a good fit for him, because if the Rams can get to some sort of meaningful salary, and that's the conversation coming up in just a little bit of how they can create some spots, that's one thing. The other part of it is, will a year under Sean McVay, again, big question mark here now because we don't know if Sean McVay is coming back or not, allow him to rehabilitate his brand? Is Matthew Stafford going to be here next year? That's a huge question mark coming up next in Locked On Rams. There are all these other things going on. Now, I think you've got a pretty clear indication that no good team is saying, hey, bring me Baker Mayfield and give him the starting quarterback. I don't think the Rams would be incredibly bullish on having Baker Mayfield be their starting quarterback. But having seen the way that they've handled the backup quarterback position really since Sean McVay has gotten here, where it's, I don't want to say it's a throwaway spot, but it's a spot where they're trying to save some money, where they're going maybe a little bit below the line. Baker Mayfield was a huge upgrade. And I know I've said this before, but instead of the Rams being on a 6-game losing streak when Baker Mayfield comes in, maybe they're on a 4-2 run. They're in the middle of a playoff hunt, and they just need to keep their head about even, right? You need to win as many as you lose. He can do that. I think we've seen a pretty good indication that he can do that. I think that's what you have to sell him on. That's the vision that you have to present to him. And again, all of this is predicated on whether Sean McVay is coming back or not. I think he'll leave. I think somebody's going to offer him a starting job. I think the money will be very hard to turn down. It's probably his last opportunity to go be a starter somewhere. But what I saw from him yesterday was the guy I saw in Cleveland, was the guy you saw a little bit in Carolina. Frantic, inaccurate, not quite the composed vet that you might hope coming off of the bench, but a guy that can also make a play here and there, a guy that is far better than John Wolford, a guy that's far better than Bryce Perkins, but comes at a much greater cost. I was very bullish on him. I think if you can get him at the price that you like, you do everything you can to keep him. But if he leaves, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he probably does, but I think that also answers your question about what you need to do with your backup quarterback role moving forward. Do you continue to go super low budge with the guys that they had, or do you need somebody that's a former starter in this league that can win you some games? Maybe not a bunch of games. You know, Brock Purdy is the ultimate example of somebody come in and win a bunch of games, but can you win half of them or near half of them? I think Baker Mayfield could do that for you, but not terribly impressed by what I saw from him yesterday in that game against Seattle. All right, so who's going to be here? Who's not going to be here coming up in the 2023 season? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. Let's talk a little bit about Ultimate GM, right? One of our new partners and a sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your football franchise, well, your dream can come true, and this game, it is for you. Definitely manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. Here's what you're responsible for: hiring the coaches, hiring the coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season, everything that you've told all of your buddies that you would be great at if you just got a chance to do it. Ultimate GM is a great way to do it. You can kind of chirp at all of the other people in your life that love football. You should go check it out. You can do it with all your buddies as well. Locked On Rams listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On, that's in all caps, in the game store. That's Locked On, again, all caps, LOCKEDON, all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, so let's talk about what may happen here in the next month or so. First of all, the first domino that needs to fall is the Sean McVay one. Is he coming or is he going? Because I think it determines what happens next. If he stays, I think you're going to see if he stays, you're going to see some turnover in some big name positions. And I'm not saying all of these, but I think that at least one of these guys will not be a member of this team come 2023 unless they really want to restructure what it is that they're doing economically. I think you can put the following guys into a hat and take at least one of them that will not be here next year. And they're big names: Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, Bobby Wagner, Matthew Stafford. Okay, these are arguably the four biggest names on this team. They all make big money. They've all signed recent contract extensions with the exception of Jalen Ramsey, and you could probably get something from them on the open market if you want to try to refigure what you're going to do with the team moving forward. You're going to have to, right? And Aaron Donald has made hints about not wanting to play football anymore. This has been, they basically gave him the "you can't retire" package at the end of last year. Jalen Ramsey, who I thought was absolutely terrific yesterday and really had another very, very fine season, could get you something on the open market. Bobby Wagner was just named team MVP, and rightfully so, and just put together a season that was as good as anything that he's ever had. But if you're in the middle of a rebuild, these are the sorts of guys that you might not need. These are their performance is probably not as valuable as draft picks, as financial flexibility, and things like that. And then, of course, there's the question about the quarterback. What do you do? What do you do with Matthew Stafford, who's coming off of a season where he missed a great deal of time? Whenever you have concussion issues, whenever you have spinal issues, these are real things. This is somebody who's made a ton of money. This is somebody who's a Super Bowl champion. And this is somebody who I would imagine is looking at the end of the line much more so than what's coming up next over the next couple of years. One or more than one of these people, I think, will be gone at the end of the year, or before the start of next year. They have a lot of decisions to make. The McVay thing complicates this tremendously because I think the decisions you make, you can try to figure out who your next quarterback is if you got a different coach coming in, right? If you've got that going on, I think it's more likely that maybe Stafford moves. I'm not saying it's impossible that he doesn't move if McVay stays, but I think you've got a whole bunch of decisions to make on some very popular, very expensive, and aging players over the course of the next few weeks and months. The Rams are in a weird spot. If everybody's healthy and back, I think this is a good team. If everybody plays to their ability, I think this is a pretty good team. But we've seen what happens when that's not the case. We've seen what happens when a player or two, or in this case, literally dozens of guys go down. The quarterback, Cooper Kupp, right? All of these guys, less than their best, this is what you get. You get a team that's 5-12. When they're all at their best, we've seen what you got. You got a Super Bowl champion a year ago. So health is a part of this as well, but who the head coach is the biggest part. And I think you're going to see quite a bit of turnover between now and the beginning of next season. All right, I'm going to take a little time from Locked On Rams, kind of do my own little McVay. I will be back by the time we get to the start of next season. We're going to make sure that we find somebody for you to have all of your Rams content between then and now. But until then, I will see you at the start of next season, maybe a little bit before that, and maybe might pop in occasionally along the way. Till next time, thank you very much for making us your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen, the Locked On NFL pod, bringing you the local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.